Today I'm getting a little bit fancy because I'm cooking for my husband Ian, making all of his favorite foods, including a beef tenderloin steak with an herb topping, a little Parmesan and crisp breadcrumbs, along with a cheesy potato gratin and a tomato salad with arugula. We're gonna finish it up with the classic creme brulee. But the thing about today's recipes is that they're all scaled down just to serve 2 people. So it's kind of for date night. All right, we're gonna get started with the creme brulee because it takes the longest to cook and chill. And this recipe actually calls for vanilla extract, which makes sense because you're not using a lot. But I like using vanilla beans when I have them around. So you can use either. For a vanilla bean, you want to get one that's about 3 inches long. Again, we're only making 2 little creme brulees, so you don't need a lot. Now to use a vanilla bean, what you want to do is you want to slice it in half lengthwise, and then you open up the interior, and that's when you want to scrape out the seeds from the inside using the tip of a paring knife. You see all those seeds? I'm going to put it right into the pot where we're going to heat up the cream. And those seeds will infuse the cream with their flavor. I'm also going to throw the pot in the pot. We'll strain it out, obviously, before we make the creme brulees, but it adds flavor too. All right, so in goes the cream. Now you only need a cup of cream total. I'm going to add half of the cream to the pot, and that's just to help bloom that vanilla and dissolve the sugar. This is 2 tablespoons and a teaspoon of sugar. I'm going to whisk it together and bring it up to a boil on the stove top. Now I've made hundreds of creme brulees. It was actually one of my tasks at my very first restaurant job. And back then we didn't even bring the cream to a simmer. We just used it cold. We put it all together with the eggs and the sugar in a big burr mixer, which is like an immersion blender, but on a bigger scale. And we just kept the custard in the fridge, and we'd whisk it up and pour them out as we needed. And back then we used vanilla sugar, and that's how we got the vanilla flavor into the creme brulees. But when you're using a fresh vanilla pod, you really should bring it to a simmer. All right, there we have it. Came right to a simmer. And notice I was stirring to help that sugar dissolve. Also need to add a pinch of salt. Now this is the clever part. We're gonna add the remaining cream that's still cold. That just helps cool down the mixture before we whisk it into the egg yolks. That way you don't get cooked eggs. There we go. Here I have 3 egg yolks. All right, so working slowly at the beginning because you don't want to add all the hot liquid to the egg yolks. You want to temper them. So we're going to add a little bit, whisk it in, slowly bring the temperature of those yolks up. A little more. Once you have a little bit of the cream in there, about a 1/4 cup, you should be good to go. All right. Now we're going to strain out any bits, including that vanilla seed pod, just into a liquid measuring cup. There we go. All right, and that's as easy as making custard for creme brulee. Get the board a quick clean because we're gonna bring up the ramekins. Now, a word about ramekins, they come in lots of different sizes. These I've had for a good 2 decades. I bought them for creme brulee because I think they're perfect. I like having a nice wide surface so you get a lot of the burnt sugar on top, but they're deep enough so that when you cook them in the water bath, the water doesn't slosh over into the ramekin. The shallower ones also work well, but you just have to be a little careful in the oven. And the classic round deep ones also work pretty well, but you'll have a limited amount of sugar on top. So these are my go-to. All right, so I'm just gonna add the custard right to the ramekins. Try to make them good and even so we both get even portions, but also so that they cook at the same rate. All right, these are ready for the oven. And as I mentioned, we're gonna use a water bath. So I'm gonna add the hot water at the stove. Into the oven these go, 300 degrees. And now to add the water, I like doing it after I've put this on the oven rack. Also in the pan, there is a clean dish towel. That just prevents the ramekins from sliding around in the water bath. So you wanna fill the pan with water till it measures about 2/3 up the side of the ramekins. Of course, that water bath really evens out the cooking temperature of the custards so that they stay nice and creamy. All right, so those are safely in the oven. They're gonna take about half an hour. These look perfect. Ooh, all right, let's close the oven. Now, a couple ways to tell when your creme brulee are properly cooked. You could use an instant read thermometer. They should register around 170, 175. But if they're so shallow, it can be hard to take the temperature. Plus, I don't like to mar the surface because I like a mirror finish when I brulee the sugar on top. So the other way to do it is to just shake the ramekins gently. You can use your fingers or a pair of tongs. You see the center just jiggles ever so slightly, but the custard is set. That's how you know they're perfectly done. All right, so I'm gonna take them out. Whew, you can use tongs or fingers. Aha! They made it out of the water bath unscathed. That is the hardest part of making creme brulee. All right, so these need to cool, obviously, on the counter for 2 hours, and then they go into the fridge to chill for at least 4 hours, but you can make these up to 4 days ahead. Love what you're watching? Take your cooking to the next level with our Essential membership. Get instant access to thousands of recipes, tips, techniques, product reviews, and step-by-step videos. Our Members app allows you to search by ingredient, set dietary preferences, and save your favorite recipes. For those looking to level up, our newest feature, ATK Classes, offers more in-depth instruction led by ATK experts, so you can gain greater confidence in the kitchen. Start your free trial by visiting the App Store or going to americastestkitchen.com/YouTube today. All right, it's time to get started on making the cutest little potato gratin you ever did see. It's cheesy and it just serves 2 people. And we're gonna infuse the potatoes with a little bit of fresh thyme. You want about a teaspoon of fresh thyme. Now, fresh thyme, dried thyme. I'm a big fan of dried thyme. I use it in a lot of things. You can definitely substitute dried thyme in this dish. Instead of a teaspoon, you'd want to back it down to like a 1/4 of a teaspoon. I think thyme and oregano, sometimes rosemary are fine to use as dried herbs. I do stay away from dried cilantro, dried parsley. I think they taste better fresh. Now, the key about dried herbs is they don't last forever. And how you know if they're still good is when you open up the jar, you should smell them. It should smell herbaceous. And if you don't get anything, if you're really trying to look for any flavor coming out of that jar, it's dead and you probably should get rid of them. All right, gonna run a knife through this. All right, now, gonna add the thyme to the skillet over here because we're gonna melt in a little butter, bloom the flavor of the thyme. So a tablespoon of unsalted butter, a little bit of garlic, just 1 clove. I'm gonna use the garlic press just to press it right into the skillet, and a little bit of salt and pepper, 1/4 teaspoon salt and 1/8 of a teaspoon pepper. Now you could obviously melt this butter with the herbs in the microwave. Take about 30 seconds to a minute. I'm gonna do it on the stove top. Takes about the same amount of time. Right, just gonna put this over medium heat. Let that melt. And while that happens, we're gonna slice the potatoes. Now we're using russet potatoes today. You need about 1 pound of russets, which is essentially 2 potatoes. Perfect amount for 2 people. I'm gonna slice them into 1/4 inch thick slices. And I'm leaving the skins on because they taste great when you cook the potatoes this way. But I did scrub the potatoes so they're nice and clean. So I'm gonna slice off the ends and then just very carefully slice them 1/4 inch thick. Just take your time, don't hesitate to get the ruler out. I always have a ruler in a crock by the stove to double check myself. All right, gonna put these into a nice big bowl. All right, I hear that butter starting to sizzle. And that's it. Just want to bloom the flavor of the thyme and the garlic. Melt all that butter. Ooh, that smells good. Right onto the potatoes this flavorful butter goes. All right, I'm gonna toss them around. Make sure they get evenly coated with all that flavor. And now the cool thing about this recipe is I'm gonna cook it in the air fryer, which does a terrific job of getting the potatoes cooked through and good and crisp. So I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna wash my hands, get the air fryer basket. All right, now I'm kind of a fan of the air fryer, especially for vegetable side dishes, because if you think about it, it's just a convection oven that's very small that heats up really quickly so things get good and crisp. So if you notice, I have this little contraption here made of aluminum foil, call it a sling, and it just allows me to get the potatoes out of the air fryer when they're all nice and crisp in one piece. All right, now I'm going to spray the foil, a little bit of vegetable oil spray, again making sure the potatoes don't stick. And now I'm gonna assemble the gratin. shingling half the potatoes into the basket. Now, for the cheese, we're gonna use 2 types of cheese. We're gonna use cheddar. This is half a cup of shredded sharp cheddar. And now I'm gonna mix it with 1/4 cup of shredded Parmesan. Now I'm gonna sprinkle half this cheese over the potatoes. This is what makes the gratin right here. All right, that's good. And set the rest of this aside for later. Now we're gonna shingle the rest of the potatoes on top. Now the rest of the cheese we're gonna add during the last few minutes of cooking because we want it to be nice and gooey. So into the machine this goes. All right, and the beauty of using an air fryer is you can let the potatoes cook on their own while you get on with the rest of the meal. So we're gonna air fry them at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes until they're tender and golden. All right, so while those potatoes are cooking, it's time to make this salad. I'm gonna make a marinated tomato salad. Clean up the board a bit here. All right, here I have some beautiful tomatoes, about 1.5 pounds. And I love this recipe because tomatoes sit with salt and some of the vinaigrette and they just take on so much flavor. So I've washed these already. So now I'm just gonna cut these tomatoes into beautiful 1/2-inch wedges. Gonna remove the core first. The core, I like to use a paring knife and just angle it around the stem end here, just right around that core, and pop it out like a little cone. All right, now I'm gonna cut them into 1/2-inch wedges, nice and rustic. Doesn't have to be exact. And I love the big pieces of tomato in the salad. I just think it looks pretty. Also, that's how I like to eat the tomatoes. Nice big pieces, not the little, we call it concasse in culinary school. They're like little diced pieces of tomato that have been, their skin has been removed, their seeds have been removed, and they're almost flavorless. I much prefer big chunky tomatoes like this. All right, now the trick to this salad is we're gonna toss the tomatoes with some salt, help them release some of their flavor and their juices. So we're gonna put the tomatoes in a nice big bowl. Now we're gonna add some salt, 1/2 teaspoon of salt to be specific. And carefully toss them. And the salt brings out their flavor and just intensifies it. Now we're gonna spread them out on a rimmed baking sheet that I've lined with paper towels. That just takes a lot of the excess water out of the tomatoes so that the whole salad isn't soupy. We're just gonna let these tomatoes drain on the paper towels for about 15 minutes before we put the dressing together and start to marinate them.
Love our in-depth reviews? Get the latest from our reviews team delivered straight to your inbox. Our well-equipped cook newsletter provides top product picks, no-nonsense buying guides, and must-try recipes. No extra fluff, just the smartest ways to shop, save, and cook. Sign up for free now at americastestkitchen.com/newsletter.
These tomatoes have been sitting with the salt for 15 minutes. You can see the paper towels are pretty damp. That'll just help prevent that salad from being too watery. Also intensifies the tomato flavor. Now I'm gonna put the tomatoes into a bowl. Sometimes you can use the paper towels as a sling, but these ones are quite wet, so they're not so sturdy anymore. So I'm gonna gently put them in the bowl. All right, everybody in the pool. All right, there we go. So I'm gonna add 2 cups of arugula. Now this is baby arugula, which I love because you can find it everywhere all year long. Now if you have regular arugula, you just wanna chop it a little bit. Now I'm gonna add some fresh basil. I'm gonna give the basil a little bit of a chop. Nice big pieces of basil. All right, into the bowl it goes. Now for some more flavor, we're gonna add some garlic. 1 clove of garlic. Just gonna add it to the bowl using this rasp style grater. We're gonna add 2 tablespoons olive oil. There we go, it's about 2 tablespoons. And a tablespoon of red wine vinegar. That's good. Let's not forget about the pepper because the salt's already in there. We salted the tomatoes earlier. So 1/2 teaspoon ground black pepper. Now I'm just gonna toss this all together nice and gently. Don't wanna break up the tomatoes or really bruise that arugula too much. We're just gonna let this all marinate again for about 15 minutes. Which gives us plenty of time to prep the topping for the steak. All right, set this aside. All right, now for the topping of the steak, I mentioned it's gonna have a few herbs and some Parmesan, and it tastes amazing on the tenderloin. So we're gonna use the mini food processor here to help us make a nice fine mixture that you can pack on top to the steaks before cooking. In goes some Parmesan. This is 1/2 cup of finely grated Parmesan. We're gonna add some parsley. You want about 1/4 cup of chopped parsley. We're gonna let the little food processor do most of the work, but I like to give things a head start, getting rid of any of the tough leaves. All right, gonna give this a quick chop. Into the mini processor it goes. Also gonna add a little bit of fresh thyme, about a teaspoon. All right, rough chop with a knife. Into the processor it goes. We're gonna add 2 cloves of garlic. Just gonna use the good old press. Some olive oil, about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. And some salt and pepper, about a 1/4 teaspoon of each. Just gonna let this guy rip until you get a nice green paste. Takes a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. Gonna set this aside and it's time to get the steaks out of the fridge. All right, here is the main event, some really expensive and lovely tenderloin steaks. Now these suckers are a good 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches thick, which is perfect for this recipe because we're gonna give them a quick sear and then finish them with the herb crust on top and a little panko in a hot oven. So before I prep these, I'm gonna start heating up a pan because you need the pan to be really hot for a good sear. So I'm gonna heat up a tablespoon of oil in a nice 10-inch skillet. Now this is not a nonstick skillet, this is a traditional skillet because I want a nice good sear. And to heat a pan up so that the oil is just smoking, that's perfect for searing, and that can take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. All right, back to the steaks. Now the one thing I am gonna do, because they need very little, is I'm gonna tie them with butcher's twine. Just once around the middle, it just really helps firm them up so that they cook through nice and evenly and they maintain their shape. So a little bit of butcher's twine. Yeah, this is definitely a special occasion meal because these steaks, they're pretty high end, so they're good for a celebration. And I love it because the flavor is not super beefy. It's on the mild side. They're incredibly tender, which is how they got the name tenderloin. And they taste really good with that herb on top. The only thing these steaks need is a little salt and pepper on both sides. One hand to flip, one hand to keep clean. Salt and pepper. All right, these are ready for the skillet. I'm just gonna wash my hands really quick. Into the pan the steaks go. Ah, it's a good noise. Definitely a time to put on the hood. We're gonna sear the steak about 3 minutes on each side. All right, that looks perfect. Set that skillet off the heat. You see, it doesn't take very long to get the beautiful color, that gorgeous crust, which has good flavor and good texture. All right, now, gonna add the herb paste. Nice thick layer, the olive oil, the Parmesan, those fresh herbs. Oh, it really takes the steak to a whole nother level. All right, here's your herb paste. Perfect. Now I'm just gonna top it with a few breadcrumbs. Here I have some panko. Panko are the Japanese breadcrumbs that are super crisp. And so I'm gonna put about 2 tablespoons of panko on the top of each steak. And the 2 tablespoons is gonna look like a lot. But the trick is the first layer of panko are gonna melt into that cheesy herb paste, which really tastes delicious. And then the second layer on top are the ones that are gonna get nice and brown. It's like a top hat. Steak top hat. Oh, perfect. All right, this is going into a hot oven, 450 degrees on the middle rack. We're only gonna roast these for about 15 minutes until the internal temperature registers 120 to 125, which is medium rare. Oh, aren't they the cutest little steaks? They look like special occasion steaks for their little top hats of herbs and cheese and breadcrumbs. All right, now we're gonna temp them. Again, we're looking for a temp of 120 to 125. Oh, there we go, 120, right between 125. Again, you always look for the lowest temperature, and that is your guideline to how well cooked they are. Perfect medium rare. Just gonna let them rest here for about 5 minutes. Now, time to check those potatoes. Oh, This is why I love the air fryer. It just does magic when you're not looking. You don't have to do much. Potatoes are cooked through. I'll test it with a fork. Perfect. And you can see they're nice and starting to get golden on the outside. Now I'm going to add the rest of this cheese right to the top. Oh, thank you. Back into the air fryer this goes, just 3 or 4 minutes, just until that cheese is melted and bubbly. Okay, while those potatoes finish up in the air fryer, time to platter up the salad. Here are the tomatoes and the arugula with the basil that have been marinating for the past few minutes. I like to serve this salad on a nice big long platter. Really spread the tomatoes out. Now to top it off, we're gonna add just a little bit of crumbled goat cheese, about 1/4 cup. Sprinkle it right over the top. Almost looks like Christmas with all these colors. The red and the green and the snow white. But man, will it taste like summer. Get those potatoes from the air fryer. Love this little recipe. It is just so sweet. I mean, look at the potato gratin with those crisp edges. Now I did take them a little dark because that's how I like it, with the cheese on top. And I love that it's just enough to serve for 2. Let's get these potatoes off the foil. They pretty much slide right off because again, we greased the foil. I'll cut this in half because it serves 2. Sometimes I cut it crosswise, sometimes I cut it lengthwise. I think lengthwise looks a little unexpected, so I like that. This is our wedding china, by the way. We almost never use it. We tried using it as everyday wear, but then I chipped one of the plates and I realized I'd rather save it for special occasions. Oh, the gooey cheese right there, that goes on Ian's plate. You're welcome, Ian. All right, funny story how Ian and I actually met. We met at America's Test Kitchen season 2 of the show, and he was between restaurant jobs at the moment, but towards the end of the week, and it came down to a solid frozen turkey. I think the turkey was about 18, 19 pounds, and we needed the giblets inside the turkey on set for making gravy because all the rest of the giblets in the house had been used. So, camera shut down, production stopped, while Ian hacked through a solid frozen turkey with a big knife. And that's when I noticed him. It was in this little kitchen behind the stage with a plate glass window, and I thought, what is that dude doing? And I watched him break the knife, big chip out of it, and he kind of smirked. He put the knife aside, picked up another knife, and started hacking. And I was like, that guy's pretty cool. And we started dating a few days later. Oh, good old Ian. All right, what goes better with a meal like this than a nice glass of red wine? And I didn't buy just any old red wine to go with this meal. I bought a fabulous bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape. So one thing that I look for when I'm buying a Chateauneuf de Pape is I look that it's a proper Chateauneuf de Pape, that it comes from the right region, the right appellation. I also look at the year. Years matter because it tells you how well the grapes grew. You can look up years really easily on your phone while you're shopping to see which years were better than others. All right. Oh, it's a special day when I pop open a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape. And I mean, these things have gotten so popular, it's even mentioned in a Beastie Boys song, for goodness sake, which Ian will also love. All right, I have to take a little peek in this steak to show you what it looks like. Oh, perfect medium rare. Oh, come back here. The topping, that steak is perfection. The flavor of the herbs and the Parmesan just adds so much. Just a little taste of the potato. Siggy thinks this is date night for him. Huh, Ziggs? There's beef around. He's not far behind, huh, buddy? Right. Try a little bit of tomato. The tomato has so much flavor. With the goat cheese and that little bit of red wine vinegar, it is delicious. Ian is gonna love this. You know you're about to have a party when you walk in with the blowtorch. It means you're about to have creme brulee. And I don't mess with those little brulee torches that they sell at the gourmet stores. I like the big old Benzomatic that they sell down the street at the hardware store. Less expensive and a lot more power, so you get a better brulee. All right, here are the creme brulees that are nicely chilled. You can see they're nicely set up. Now, before we add the sugar and start to brulee the top, I just want to take a paper towel and gently pat away any excess moisture. We're gonna do it very gently. You can see that moisture right there coming through the paper towel. That will prevent the sugar from caramelizing. Try to be really gentle when you're doing this so you don't make any dents in the custard. I must have brûléed hundreds of these at the restaurant. And actually, people wanted to brûlée their own, or they wanted to come up and watch me do it. I started inviting people back behind the counter to brûlée their own. It was very fun, but the manager had to tell me to stop because I think I broke a bunch of insurance rules. Handing torches over to any old diner. Yeah, I was a kid. All right, that's good. Now for the sugar on top. I like using turbinado sugar or sugar in the raw because I love how it melts and I love how it gets really crisp when it cools. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spoon a little sugar to the top of the dish. Then you wanna shake it around so it's nice and even. Cover the surface of the custard completely. This is the trick I learned at the restaurant. Shake out any excess so you have a nice even layer of sugar. All right, back it goes. All right, party time. This is so much fun. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start working on the outside of the dish. Some of these torches don't like being upside down. The old ones did. Spin it. I mean, it is a live flame, so you have to be very careful. And I do have a fire extinguisher right nearby, always in the kitchen. Just a few more passes around, make sure that sugar is good and melted and caramelized. All right. Now, some chefs want you to put these back in the fridge to chill the custard before serving them. I like serving them right away because this is when I think the sugar is at its most crisp, and I don't mind that the custard has warmed through a little bit by the blowtorch. But if you like a nice cool custard underneath, put them back in the fridge, 15, 30 minutes or so. Now, just gonna give the top a little crack. Oh. Yeah. That's a good creme brulee. What else can I say? It's a perfect creme brulee. Great way to end date night. See you next time. If you're ready to take your cooking to the next level, head over to americastestkitchen.com and get a free trial of our ATK Essential membership. While you're there, you can sign up for our free email newsletters and download our app. So, what are you waiting for?